So normally in this series we would compare two different items, but today we're going to compare two different locations as we take a look at the Hardmode Dungeon and the Lizard Temple. Getting to these locations is very similar, but they also offer various different sets of items. Some classes may benefit more from one location than the others. Today, we'll take a look and talk about it. As always, please feel free to put your comments down below and let me know what you think and what would you prefer, Hardmode Dungeon or the Lizard Temple. First up, we'll take a look at the Hardmode Dungeon. Now, in order to get to the Hardmode Dungeon, you have to defeat Plantera. While the dungeon is easily accessible once Skeletron is down in pre-hard mode, it doesn't really turn over into the hard mode version till Plantera is defeated. That's when new mobs come out along with new drops and the ability to get a new armor. First up, it should be noted that over a dozen new enemies will begin to spawn in the Hardmode Dungeon, with the most notable being the Paladin. This thing also hits like a truck, so it is not to be trifled with, and you'll have to be very, very careful. Necromancers, Diabolists, Skeleton Snipers, and even Bone Lee are a real pain in the butt and have been known to give players a massive headache. It should be said though, if you can hang in there, there's some pretty sweet rewards in the dungeon as well. For instance, if you can take down the Skeletal Sniper, you have a chance of getting the Sniper Rifle, which has the ability to cause some severe damage and can crit very high. Tactical Skeletons can drop the Tactical Shotgun, which is a really great weapon for Rangers as well. One thing I like using is Chlorophyte Bullets with this, because it makes taking Duke Fishron down so much more easier because of the damage it can do. So already, this is really great for those Rangers out there who are looking for a nice upgrade. For mages out there, the Spectre Staff is something that's wonderful too, but you'll really want to get the Inferno Fork and the Shadow Beam Staves. Now, the Shadow Beam Staff drops from the Necromancer, while the Inferno Fork drops from Diabolists. These aren't always easy to get, but sometimes you can get lucky and the game will give you one if you destroy enough enemies. Also, during your run in the dungeon, you'll also have the ability to get the Ectoplasm now as well. Every mob you kill has a chance of dropping Ectoplasm. Before you can get it, you actually have to kill it like an enemy as well. So you kill the Ectoplasm, you collect it, and from there you can craft that Ectoplasm with Chlorophyte bars, and that is going to give you the Spectre Armor, which is a really good upgrade for mages. There's also the Magnet Sphere, which is a fun little spell to use, but there's so much more. We're going to move on into the melee weapons. If you're a big fan of Kingdom Hearts, the Keybrain is a pretty cool weapon to use. While it's a nice weapon, I wouldn't hold on to it compared to something like an Influx Waver. Also, we have the Paladin's Hammer. Good luck getting this because it can be quite a rare drop from the Paladin itself. But this acts like a boomerang basically, and it does pierce through multiple enemies. So for the most part, the Hardmode Dungeon does cover a variety of classes and does a lot of really good things. There's a bunch of accessories I didn't cover, like for instance the Armor Polish, the Tabai, Black Belt, which the latter two are used to craft the Master Ninja gear. Wisp in the Bottle's always good, and of course there's the Bone Feather for crafting wings. So overall, this is a very rounded out area. With that though, we're going to take a look at the Lizard Temple now. Much like the Hardmode Dungeon, the Lizard Temple can't be entered until after Plantera has been defeated. There used to be ways before to do it, but I really don't believe there is now. There may be a way using actuators, but I haven't tried it yet. In the terms of difficulty, the Jungle Temple is pretty much right up there with the Hardmode Dungeon. And while it doesn't have a whole cast of characters, it still shouldn't be overlooked. Lizards are the first thing you'll notice. They're basically lizard people, and they do have a lot of hit points. What makes them particularly annoying though is once they lose half health, they tend to get on all fours and charge you very quick. They can do a lot of damage in this form as well, so you have to be very careful. The next mob is going to be Flying Snakes. As we go with the more Aztec theme in this area, they're pretty cool, and while they do damage, they're not particularly difficult to bring down. The biggest enemy you're going to face in the temple is going to be traps and spikes because they're everywhere. So if you become prepared with the mechanical lens or any other kind of wrench or wire cutters, you should be able to see these traps and take care of them quickly. And that's just about what you'd want to do before getting poisoned, hit with spiky balls, or hit with a flamethrower. The spikes themselves, while they're not really menacing, you do want to take care of them with a pickaxe or even some bombs to get rid of them. They're much less troublesome than the traps, but they can still get in your way, especially when you start getting swarmed by more mobs. All of this is fun and well, but it leads us into the temple boss, the Golem. Now, of course, the Hardmode Dungeon doesn't have a boss. Once Plantera is done, it is just unlocked. Where the temple, it becomes unlocked, but you also have a boss to fight in the Golem. The Golem isn't particularly challenging. He just basically lunges at you with his fists, and then he tries to stomp you. In his final form, he basically has his head fly around the room spitting fireballs and tries to stomp you. Now, this can be challenging in a small smaller room. Sometimes it tends to spawn that way and it becomes massively more difficult. I hear you could put actuators underneath the altar and move the altar that way, though I haven't tried it yet. Else you would have to get the pick saw from the golem in order to move the altar itself. Now let's get into what some of you probably are looking more forward to, which is the items and drops you can get. Now granted, the list here for the temple is nowhere near as long as the dungeon, but some of these items here are quite strong. First off, I just mentioned the pick saw. Again, this drops from the golem. It is a very fast pickaxe that can tear through lizard bricks, and I believe it's the one of its kind. No other pickaxe can break through lizard bricks. Again, it is very fast, it has a rapid action, and it can take down trees and such, again, hence the saw part of the pick saw. Next up, for melee users, we have the Possessed Hatchet. Now this is much like the Paladin's Hammer, but the Possessed Hatchet has more damage, and while it doesn't pierce multiple enemies, this can do a much higher damage to single enemies when they make connection. It should be noted, if you're careful with using this, you can make it hit multiple enemies on the return, but still, it's a little bit tricky. Melee users also have the Golem Fist, but this is kind of like the KO Cannon, and while it is nice, it's not something that I'm generally fond of myself. I much more enjoy the Possessed Hatchet. Rangers have the Stinger and Stinger Bolts. This one's kind of interesting because it launches needles, it's like a needle gun, that tend to explode. So the Stinger does work pretty well. While it doesn't shoot out higher DPS like some of the Hardmode Dungeon weapons do, this still can hold its own, and in large groups this can be really great for crowd control. For magic users and mages, the Staff of Earth is pretty nice, though again, it's something that doesn't really drop much for me, so I'm not going to try to say too much on it, but it can get the job done. The Heat Ray, again, is a nice pleasant surprise. Both of these magic weapons aren't as great as some of their counterparts in the Hardmode Dungeon, but they still do quite well. Now, when you kill the golem, he tends to drop beetle husks, and much like the Hardmode Dungeon where it drops the ectoplasm, these beetle husks are going to be used to craft armor for melee users. This is going to be the beetle armor set, which has two different varieties. One's going to be a DPS variety, another one's going to be a tanking or a defense variety. And much like the Spectre armor, the beetle armor is going to be pretty much endgame all the way through, so it's something you really need to get if you're a melee user. Before we move on, I should say the Sunstone is another accessory you can get with this, and this is part of something really greater. You combine this with the Moonstone to create the Celestial Stone, and once you combine the Celestial Stone with the Moon Shell, you get the Celestial Shell, which is like one of the greatest accessories in-game. It's really an endgame accessory that a lot of players should have. So my final overall analysis of both of these locations, I think they're on a difficult level, so they're both very equally difficult with their own separate challenges. The Jungle Temple doesn't have as many mobs, but it can be quite tricky when you first get in. After a while, once you start disabling some of the traps, it becomes much easier, and it makes it more doable than the Hardmode Dungeon. With that, you tend to get mobbed by different mobs, so dying stays pretty much easier with Hardmode Dungeon. I feel like when it comes to melee users, you would probably want to go to the temple first, because it has the beetle husks, which you're going to need, as well as the Possessed Hatchet. You may like the pick saw as well, so that could be a good pickup. Sunstone is something that should definitely not be overlooked. You want to pick that up for eventually making the Celestial Shell, maybe even the Golem Fist. But for the most part, I feel like other classes can get more value out of the Hardmode Dungeon because more of their weapons tend to be higher caliber and higher power than the temple. Now, that doesn't mean the other classes can't find value in the temple. Again, the Heat Ray, Staff of Earth, it can be really good for mages. It could be a nice upgrade for some, as well as the Stinger for rangers. Overall, I think my preference would probably go with the Hardmode Dungeon because, again, it seems to be more well-rounded. It's much more bigger and laid out better, and overall, you don't have to deal with as much traps. Of course, the only downside with this is that the mobs can easily kill you in such a space just because of the wider variety, and of course you have to be mindful of the paladin and its thousands of hit points. Having a well-rounded assortment of accessories and weapons makes it very nice, and the caliber of those weapons are really high as well. If you're a melee user, I would definitely recommend going to the Jungle Temple first to get the beetle husks to make the armor, and try picking up the Possessed Hatchet as well. For other classes, you could probably start off with the Hardmode Dungeon and kind of go from there, and then head back to the Jungle Temple to just get the golem out of the way. Everybody does need to beat the golem, by the way, so you can progress further on, because without that, you can't get the celestial events. Okay, everyone, that's going to do it. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below, because everyone's going to have their own different preferences on this situation. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to rate it as always, as it helps the channel out greatly. If you have any suggestions, I would love to hear from you as well in the comments. And keep your eyes open for more videos to come. So, have yourselves a wonderful day, and I'll see you again next time. The video's over, but there's more where that came from. Be sure to subscribe for more Terraria Let's Plays, Top 5s, and other videos as well as we cover different titles. You can click on one of the videos here for more. Be sure to rate this video accordingly, as it helps the channel out greatly. Have yourself a wonderful day, and I will see you again next time.